stories from around the corner
and around the country.
You're listening to All the Best.
Proudly supported by the Art Gallery of New South Wales.
Before we get into this week's stories, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that I'm recording from stolen and Gadigal land, and pay my respect to Gadigal elders past and present, and also recognise that the area where FBI Radio is situated, Redfern, has long been a place of storytelling, strength, resistance and resilience for First Nations communities. You're listening to All the Best from FBI Radio 94.5. I'm Kwame Slusher, and I want you to pause and close your eyes. Imagine that you are suddenly in the bush. Listen to the creaking of branches. Maybe you can hear an Australian raven. Listen to the rushing river, and hold on to that feeling for a moment. Now imagine that it all stops, and all that's left is silence and a creeping smell of rot. Now I want you to think about how so-called development and poor management of these natural spaces can take away that feeling you were holding on to forever. To mark Earthday, we're playing two stories that explore how we can use disruption to affect change and save the environment around us. In our first story, Meagan takes us on a journey on the Murray-Baaka River that led to the Menindee fish kill in 2019.
The first time I saw the Darling River, I wondered if it was even a river at all. It was September 2018, and what should have been a springtime flow was an empty channel of dust and exposed tree roots. All that remained was a dribble of grey-green muck at the bottom. The Murray-Darling is the largest river system in Australia. It spans over 1 million square kilometres, with dozens of rivers that originate from southern Queensland to northern Victoria, and all meander to the Murray mouth, just east of Adelaide. And as I stared down at a stagnant pool in a drying riverbed, it was clear to me this complex river system is struggling to survive.
Greed and corruption is destroying this river system.
There is, without a doubt, money involved.
I think it is criminal, and I think we've seen a lot of criminal things going on when it comes to water.
We need to know what's gone on here. I'm Meagan Williams. Come with me as we wade through murky waters, where corruption and crooked dealings have strangled the Murray-Darling and left it for dead.
The influence that the cotton industry has had on water policy is toxic.
Yes, it might be legal to take that water, but is it morally right?
For over 60,000 years, the Murray-Darling River system has been the lifeblood for 40 Aboriginal nations. These days, its agricultural production is valued at $24 billion a year, and tourism a further $8 billion. It supplies 3 million people their drinking water, and supports migratory birds that fly across the planet, and endangered fish found nowhere else in the world. Whichever way you look at it, there's a lot riding on the fate of the Murray-Darling. And for many, it's a matter of life or death.
I believe it's a part of genocide, what's happening in our communities.
We all got to stand together as one and say no more.
Interstate squabbles over water rights in the Murray-Darling Basin date back before Federation. It was 1946 when flow rates were first recorded at a little spot called Menindee, a 45-minute drive upstream from Wentworth, where the Darling River meets the Murray. Until the year 2000, the lower Darling had ceased to flow only twice in more than half a century. But since then, the Darling River has come to a complete standstill in 10 of the last 20 years. And from 2015, there's been over 900 days without a single drop running out the bottom. An environmental disaster playing out in slow motion.
Locals along the Menindee Lakes near Broken Hill fear the health of the river system is in crisis. Up to 1 million fish, including many native species, are dead and decaying in the lower Darling River due to toxic blue-green algae.
It was Tuesday the 8th of January, 2019.
My name is Dick Arnold. I'm here with Rob McBride.
Apocalyptic scenes of a mass fish kill went viral on social media.
Look at these iconic fish of Australia being treated like this. You have to be bloody disgusted with yourself.
Kate McBride from Tulano Station was one of the first on the scene.
So it just started like any other day, started January, so it was stinking hot, and all of a sudden we get a call from a mate saying there's all these fish that have died up at Menindee.
She filmed the viral video of 2 grown men that cradled dying Murray cod in their arms. The scenes she saw were truly shocking.
What we witnessed was just beyond our wildest imaginations. It was horrific. You're driving around Kinchiga National Park and going around the bend, and you just see the Darling River, or what used to be the Darling River, just blanketed in dead fish. And I guess what I remember most from that day is just the smell of just rotting animals.
Okay.
And the complete devastation. It's going to stick with me for the rest of my life, that's for sure. I know that.
Makes me feel like crying again.
There were 3 mass fish kills on the lower Darling over the 2018-2019 summer. The drought leading up to it was severe, but not unprecedented. So what were all those fish doing there with the blue-green algae laying in wait?
The reason that these fish were up there at Menindee is because these native fish know that when the river is low or drying up, that the Menindee lakes can really act as a refuge during times of hardship or times of drought. These fish were heading up to Menindee lakes because they use it as a bit of a refuge during these dry times. But because of government decisions, all the water had been let go of the lakes, and the water wasn't there for them to find a refuge in.
Man-made disaster.
And then all of a sudden they were stuck in these stagnant pools, blue-green algae got going, and all of a sudden they were dead.
Brought to you by the New South Wales Government, the Federal Government and the Murray-Darling Basin Authority.
In the days leading up to the fish kill, the mercury dropped to 16 degrees Celsius after a full week with temperatures topping 45 degrees in the shade. So in the closest town of Menindee, while locals shivered leaving the pub on last drinks, down at the river, this cold snap was causing the blue-green algae to die and consume all the oxygen available in the stagnant weir pool. Life in the river suffocated en masse. For Barkindji elder Badger Bates, an event like this was once unthinkable.
Blue-green algae, we didn't know what that was. It wasn't around when I was a kid, It just wasn't there, and why I say this, because nobody talked about it. We used to get cod, perch, black brim, catfish, and then there are some other little small ones. There was other little things that we don't see now. It was like we used to call them Charlies. But this is a funny little beetle, and it walked on the water, and it was like a water spider sort of thing. And they'd be big masses, and sometimes you just see the water just black with all these spider things. But then that was part of the food chain too, because the fish and that ate them. But you don't see that anymore.
A report by the Australian Academy of Sciences pointed the finger at excessive upstream irrigation and lack of water in the Menindee lakes as the underlying cause of the mass fish kills. So what's happened in recent history that's brought this once mighty river to its knees?
At the very overarching principle level, everyone forgot about the river for the last 40 or 50 years.
There's a never-ending list of reports.
Well, there's 2 fish reports.
Inquiries.
Ken Matthews, Productivity Commission.
Investigations.
John Kennery's review. There's the ACCC.
And allegations of foul play.
There's the Royal Commission.
Into water management.
We've just had a review into a first flush thing. That's off the top of my head. How am I going?
Alan White's a pretty clued-in character when it comes to water.
I probably pass as a water junkie, for want of a better description. And maybe it's genetic, because I think my father probably falls in the same category, and probably my grandfather as well.
His family has grown citrus on the Darling River north of Wentworth since the 1930s. Their involvement in government consultations can shed light on just how long people have raised the alarm on the Darling River.
The original issuing of the water licences up north was excessive, particularly expectations of how much water could be taken out of a system. But at the time, that was conventional best wisdom. My father disagreed with that, and a lot of people down here disagreed with it. And in the second half of the 70s and the early 80s, there were a lot of objections put into the issuing of those water licences up north. Those objections were based on water quality and river management grounds. Where are we now? We've got huge water quality issues, and the river management's up the creek, so to speak.
There's still so much finger pointing going on as to why the Menindee Lakes were dry.
That's Kate McBride again.
You know, the different governments pointed the finger at each other, and each of them pointed the finger at the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, and no one stood up and said, yeah, we stuffed up, we're going to learn from this. We had both the federal government and New South Wales governments trying to normalise millions of fish dying to make it seem like, nah, it's not us doing a bad job. We saw over 1 million fish die. If you saw a pile of 1 million koalas, it would be the end of the world sort of thing. We would make real changes. But because they're just fish, and because the government got real quick on the clean-up, it just gets swept under the rug. And that's the scary thing, is that, you know, are we going to have the same issue next summer? That we haven't seen the core changes within the policies and things to make sure that we never see this issue happening again, and that scares me.
Authorities warn that floods and long dry spells may lead to another summer of fish kills. Without long-term changes to the way water is controlled in this country, 1 million dead fish is only the beginning.
That story was produced by Meagan Williams. The supervising producer was Richard Dinnen. It was produced as part of the National Features and Documentary Series back in 2020. Meagan likes to say that since 2020, some things have changed, but the big issues have not. You can check out our show notes for what's happened along the Baaka since 2020. And for the latest on life, culture, and the big issues on Australia's waterways, tune in to Waterwatch Radio wherever you get your podcasts. Meagan produces the show, which was up for Walkley last year. In our second story, which comes from the 2019 archives, Ryan heads to a school strike for climate and meets the messengers declaring a climate emergency.
The night before the climate strike, I get a text from one of the organisers. He says I can tag along with him for the day. When I meet him, there's only a handful of high school students here helping to set up. In a few hours, this park will be packed with 80,000 protesters. Ambrose woke up at 5 o'clock this morning to do his first TV appearance.
And the first thing this morning was
The first thing this morning I came here and did the Today Show, so that was at like 7 or something like that.
And what's your name? And
my name's Ambrose Hayes. I go to a school in the middle of the city. They don't really like me mentioning the name.
I noticed a lot of you are wearing school uniform. Why is
that? Because the school, it symbolises that we're school students and that we're still going to school, obviously. And the strike is so important because this is a day in history that can affect our futures, and it'll get our politicians to hopefully finally listen to us about the climate crisis.
How old are you?
I'm 14.
Yeah. Part of me is like, I mean, you obviously get this a lot. They're like, people are so inspired. Like, when I was 14, I wasn't doing things like this.
Yeah.
Which is my immediate reaction as well. But I also, there's part of me that feels a bit saddened that you feel at this age that you have this responsibility. That this is something that you feel like as a 14-year-old, you're not satisfied with what the people in power are doing.
We don't want to have to strike. We feel as though we don't really have a choice. The government is not acting. People argue that we should just protest on the weekend. We've literally done protests for years on the weekend and they haven't made a difference. And as soon as we take a few days off school, everyone takes notice.
The school strike organisers get treated like celebrities. They have wranglers chasing them around, scheduling their media appearances. I follow Ambrose as he does interviews for Greenpeace, the ABC, Vogue, and the UN. The message they're pushing and the goal of today is a call for the government to fulfil their 3 demands.
Which is 1, no new fossil fuel power, including the Adani Carmichael mine. The second one is 100% renewable energy generation and exports by 2030. And the third one is to fund a just transition and to create new jobs for workers in the fossil fuel industry and to help the communities affected by it.
That third demand is important. It's there to address the division between climate activists and workers in the fossil fuel industry. And it's the reason that one of the speakers today is from the Maritime Union of Australia.
I want everyone here to join me in a chant. Climate justice, workers' rights, one struggle, one fight.
My name's Tommy John Herbert. I'm a wharfie down at Port Botany and also an ex-fossil fuel worker and proud environmental activist.
They want to pit workers against the climate movement because they know if we're united, we're more powerful than them. Let's fight for it.
I think, if you're really serious about changing those industries, you've got to involve those workers in that industry. You have to have a little bit of empathy for these workers. Like, if you go at them and tell them to stop what they're doing, people just naturally will just get defensive and fight against anyone who's trying to shut down their livelihood. So I think it's just more about can we create another industry with similar conditions that those workers can move over to. And I think that seemed to be an argument that a lot of people were jumping on board with.
One struggle, one fight.
After the speeches, I follow Ambrose to the front of the march.
You should went for the main group, so you have to get down College Street. Down College Street! Blocked! Yeah, you go round and then through Park. Because the main protest is coming this way and you'll get crushed and you'll get trampled.
Can't even get to the front apparently. It's just the police have been a pain.
We make it to the front. We see a man charging into the crowd.
It seems someone just trying to rile up the crowd and maybe cause violence, who knows, but the police are just trying to tackle him down, just running into buildings and trying to tackle him.
After the school strike, I went looking for an alternative viewpoint to the protesters. Not because I think this is an issue that has 2 legitimate sides, it isn't, but because it affects all of us, even those of us who think that it doesn't. I imagine speaking to someone like the man who rushed at the school strikers, only, with better emotional regulation. What I wasn't expecting to find was a scientist who believes that Australia shouldn't declare a climate emergency.
If you want to pick up the dismissives, the cautious, the uncertain, climate emergency isn't going to do that, it's going to be seen as something of a stunt.
This is David Holmes, Director of the Climate Change Communication Research Hub.
So, first of all, let me be clear. Do I think there is a climate emergency? Yes, I do, absolutely. Do I think it's a good communication strategy to communicate that to the broader Australian population? Well, not at the moment, and certainly not at a national level. The reason being is that climate change is still so politicised in Australia, and so it creates quite a lot of division.
David studies how to effectively communicate about climate change. His concern is that for Australians who are climate skeptics or who just aren't that alarmed about climate change yet, protests don't work. He believes that in order to reach those groups, we need other kinds of messaging.
So it's not so much that it's about criticising climate emergency or any other message. It's rather that there is no single message that really works at the moment. So what you're seeing with the protests and some of the protest brands like Extinction Rebellion is this frustration that, well, we've got to do something because the politicians aren't doing anything. And from that point of view, they're very well intentioned. But because most of the population, whilst they're concerned about climate change, they still see it as distant in space and time, you know, the message of protest really doesn't resonate just yet.
In terms of Extinction Rebellion polarizing people a certain way, we think that the disruption that we cause blocking a road is really super minor compared to the disruption that the climate emergency will actually cause overall. Additionally, movements like Black Lives Matter in the US have taken this kind of disruption previously, and it's been shown that over time, over a sustained campaign of multiple years, that support for the cause that Black Lives Matter was behind did increase over time. My name is David Kahn, and I'm an organizer and member of Extinction Rebellion.
Extinction Rebellion uses a strategy called nonviolent direct action. Essentially, they create chaos, peaceful chaos, to communicate the need for urgent action.
So we aim for disruption. So it can be economic disruption, it can be societal disruption, it can be media disruption. So we aim to disrupt narratives, disrupt people's thoughts, and kind of shake the complacency that exists around, you know, that it's okay what's going on, that not dealing with climate change is fine, that things are going to be okay. We aim to shake that up.
Shortly after the school climate strike, members of Extinction Rebellion marched on Railway Square in Sydney as part of an international protest. They lay down on the street, holding up traffic, until the police told them to move on. Protesters who refused were arrested.
I was arrested, yeah. They put everybody in wrist locks, as far as I could tell. So we had two officers that dragged me, put me in the wrist lock, and then dragged me off by my armpits. Usually they are meant to use 4 officers to actually pick you up if you're lying down or you're floppy, but they only had 2, so they dragged me.
There's video footage of David being dragged away by his armpits. His body is totally limp, his face expressionless.
I didn't want to give the police a reaction necessarily. I wanted to maintain composure for myself, so I tried, to be relaxed, to be calm as well, not escalate the situation either. Because, there's people going to be taking photos of you. We're very focused on making these indelible images and iconic images too. Our theory of change, as you might call it, would be that there might be inconvenience from the disruption to people on the day, but that ultimately over time people will side with the climate activists, taking the moral and ethical stance that we need to take climate action because they will see that we're in the right.
But for the moment at least, many people don't view the issue with the same urgency as Extinction Rebellion does. They're not connecting with the message, they're just having their commute interrupted.
Where climate change is politicised, advocacy doesn't really work, which is another aspect of why, some of the more spectacular kinds of protests don't really work, because people just get pigeonholed. Well, of course they would do that because, they're from here or they're that group. Whereas what you want is trusted sources who aren't really seen to have any particular ideological view they're trying to push. They're just simply showing the facts.
At the Climate Communication Hub, David and his team are researching who are the most trusted sources on climate science. It turns out that the ideal climate communicators are weather presenters.
Not only are they trusted, but unlike farmers and firefighters and even scientists, they're also really skilled communicators who have access to a large audience. So with our program, we broker the science, we get the facts represented in an easy-to-understand visual way, and the weather presenters present it.
Back in 1970, when disco still ruled the airwaves, Ballarat's average daytime temperature in winter was around 10.6 degrees. Now we fast forward to 2019.
Cool start to July, but the trend is actually for increasing average July
observations, and this is our hottest Halloween on record. Now,
They surveyed viewers before the TV segments appeared, and then again 12 months later.
And we look at whether there's been a learning effect and whether that learning effect has also had an impact on their concern about climate change, as well as whether they're changing their behaviour as a result.
I kind of suspected that David Conn, as an advocate for mass civil disobedience, would be dismissive of the weather presenter study, that he would view it as being not radical enough. But he was all for it.
Of course. I mean, like, everyone should be doing anything they can do. You know, we've got one tactic, and if people have different tactics that work on different people, I think we're all in support of that. You know, we don't expect to do this alone, and we're not so confident to say that the strategy is going to work with 100% certainty, right? Extinction Rebellion believes that we need drastic climate action now, and as a person, I believe that too, but not everyone is going to, you know, think that's the best message, and that message will not necessarily work for everyone, right? You know, this is a total emergency, and I think if people are willing to tackle it in different ways that work for different people in conveying the message of the climate emergency, that sounds like a totally valuable contribution.
This is what democracy looks like. Show me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Show me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Show me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.
That story was produced by Ryan Pemberton back in 2019. The supervising producer was Zasha Rosen. Since then, anti-protest legislation has been creeping in over the last 5 years. New South Wales, South Australia, Tasmania, Victoria, and Queensland have all passed anti-protest laws that impose significant fines and even imprisonment for protesting. Whether you're a storyteller or a story lover, tune in to All the Best for unique stories from independent audiomakers from so-called Sydney and around the country. Catch our live radio broadcast on Sundays at 9:30 a.m. on FBI Radio 94.5. Listen to our podcast Tuesdays at 4 p.m. on allthebestradio.com, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe now so you never miss an episode. All the Best is made at FBI Radio on Gadigal land in association with SIN on Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung and Boon Wurrung lands and ACCC on Arrente and Warramungu lands. The All the Best editorial producer is Mel Bakewell, and Phoebe Adler-Ryan is our executive producer. Patrick McKenzie is our community coordinator, and thanks to all the volunteers who help to bring you All the Best each week. Shining Bird composed our theme music, and Annie Hamilton designed the artwork. We're heard across Australia on the Community Radio Network, and were made possible by the Art Gallery of New South Wales and the Community Broadcasting Foundation. You can find our full archive of more than 500 episodes at allthebestradio.com. I'm Kwame Slesham. Thanks for listening.